Hello, everybody, and welcome to Building a Culture of Compliance session at the Advent Engage virtual conference. Honored to have the last slot in the calendar and wrap it up strong. I'd like to just quickly introduce myself before I introduce the two panelists that I'm joined by. So my name is Matthew Brousse. I am a 15-year veteran at what is now SS&C ES, working closely with the Advent team on a regular basis. I've had a couple of different, primary roles in my history here. One of the main ones was running our consulting team, which focused on account management, implementation, projects, and overall support and solutions. Working with a lot of our large asset management firms, hedge funds, endowments, pensions, etc. My other role that I currently sit in is I own and operate our vertical from a sales perspective around the asset management segment. So working closely with my team to focus on North America and delivering solutions to clients that are looking for the front, middle, or back office technology platforms out there. I'm joined by both Verity Larson and Jason Abelowitz, both of which have worked with in a number of different engagements. And I'd love to turn it over to both of them to just quickly introduce themselves before we introduce the topic and the content. Verity, if you want to go first.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everybody. My name is Verity, and I am a technology consultant. I started my own firm about 6 years ago. The name is Versoft, and we solely focus on the tech stack, working with investment management firms, family offices, really in the buy-side space, ensuring that the technology that you are using is the right solutions, but that you are using it to the fullest extent possible. Our goal is just to make sure that you're being as efficient and as effective as possible in your use of technology. And today, of course, as we talk about compliance, technology, of course, plays a key role in that. So we look forward to this dialogue with you. Jason, over to you.
Great, thank you, Verity. And thanks, Matt, for inviting me to the seminar today. So I am currently an independent consultant, and I've been working on a number of engagements for asset managers and private funds, primarily focusing on compliance, finance, software implementations, and operational efficiency. So as you could imagine, I have a lot of insight into various compliance programs and how they leverage technology. Prior to being a consultant, I launched a startup hedge fund, and I was the CFO, and I also developed and managed our compliance program. And then prior to the startup, I spent 9 years at Coleraine Capital, which was formerly known as Mayo Capital, as the CFO and CCO. And I had the overall responsibilities of compliance, finance, ops, and IT. And then earlier in my career, I had launched another startup and also worked at GMO in operations and trading. So I'll hand it over back to you, Matt.
Perfect. And thank you both for joining. Wouldn't be able to get through this without you, or at least wouldn't be as entertaining as me just standing up here and talking for a while. So I appreciate you both working with me to put this together. So in terms of the topic and, building on a culture of compliance, right? A little bit of background on what we're hoping to achieve and tackle here. What I say is during my time in the industry, right? And as, the 15 years it has, we've seen a pretty pivotal shift from trying to, firms trying to simplify compliance to really truly embracing the topic. And not only within the compliance team, but really embracing it throughout the organization. I'd like to spend our time with everyone today discussing what compliance really means, how firms can create efficiencies and transparency around compliance, as well as, and more importantly, some of the challenges I think we're all facing in trying to attain building this culture of compliance. Additionally, we'd love to touch on some of the popular trends and how it directly intersects with the culture of compliance. And then we'll also try to leave time for questions at the end of the session. So if you do have questions as an attendee, please feel free to submit those throughout via the chat feature. and we'll try to get to those, or as many of those as we can, as part of the conversation. That being said, I'd love to just jump right into the meat of this and kick off. So, I'd love to start by really defining both the topic and the challenges associated with creating the culture of compliance within a firm. Verity, why don't we start with you? Compliance, I think, can be defined as a variety of different things depending on the firm, types of funds they operate, types of investors they work with. How do you, from a general perspective, or even more specifically, tend to define compliance from the Verisoft perspective when you're working on a client engagement?
Yeah, it's as you pointed out, compliance just means different things to everybody. The definitions can vary widely. When we generally start talking to folks about compliance, really the simplest definition is just simply following the rules defined by a set organization, whether that's a regulatory agency or it may even just be the firm itself. So whether it's the SEC, the OCC, FINRA, CFTC, any of those organizations. But then it really comes down to what does that mean within your own organization? Because there's a lot of different factors when it comes to your business as to what compliance rules and regulations you specifically are required to follow. So it's really important to understand exactly what rules and regulations your firm is required to follow, and making sure that that is clearly defined and set across your organization and understood before you go and try to start implementing different solutions to solve those compliance portions. So that's, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Jason, as somebody that's worn numerous hats within a singular organization, whether it was your time at Coleraine, both as CFO and CCO, or within some of the startups or engagements you're operating on, what's your take on how to think about compliance and what's in scope?
Yeah, sure. So compliance is very holistic because it really touches the entire business. If you think about the CCO role, 10 years ago, CCOs did job duties very different than they do today. Today, you have to essentially be a cybersecurity and technology expert to be a CCO. I think we all know the foundations of compliance is meeting fiduciary duties, regulatory requirements, and best practices, some of the things that Verity mentioned. But I think as of late, trying to meet client investment demands, investor demands in the virtual environment, a lot of firms have had to adapt to virtual ODD and sharing data in a data room due to COVID. In terms of the program, I think the compliance program must be customized and it must be right-sized for the organization. So if I'm working with a small firm that's 4 or 5 people that manages $200 million, that compliance program is going to look a lot different than a compliance program for a $2 billion, $3 billion advisor. And really, there's kind of 2 themes I'd like to discuss in terms of how to foster a culture of compliance. And this is really from my personal experiences of being a CCO and working at several organizations. And I think the first is tone at the top. As I mentioned, I've consulted for a number of firms, and really, if there's a right tone at the top, it generally equates to having a strong culture of compliance. And the second point is meaningful, is compliance is really a shared corporate responsibility. So when I was CCO, the first thing I did was decentralize the compliance program. And although the CCO is responsible for leading the compliance program, there should be leadership throughout the firm with the program. So for example, I considered a bottoms-up approach where what I did with the operations team is we spent a lot of time streamlining and automating our processes. And it essentially freed up, operations associates' time where they could focus on compliance and partner with other business units. And I think this is twofold. It helps them add value to the firm, but also helps their career development in terms of developing skills, and they learn something new. A couple more points I was going to make is spend time to educate other business units about your policies and procedures and train them. And what we did at my prior firm was formed committees or working groups. I think it's really important to get firm-wide representation in order to build a collaborative compliance environment. Everyone feels like they're part of the process and has a vested interest. The last point I'm going to make is something you don't necessarily hear in the same sentence, and it's two words: compliance and fun. So we had training. So everyone here is probably, I can't see everyone's faces, but everyone has to go through compliance training, and a lot of folks don't like to do that. So we incorporated games and awarded prizes. One of my former colleagues came up with the idea of Jeopardy training. So we had different categories like cybersecurity, personal trading, etc. And we had teams. So different teams would compete against each other. And as everyone knows that's on the session right now, the investment industry is very competitive. So you can imagine there was a lot of back and forth and bragging rights after the winning team was announced. So really, I think, as I mentioned, as I started with, compliance is very holistic. It's not just, it doesn't live in a document. It doesn't live in the compliance department. It encompasses the entire firm.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really great perspective. I like the concept of decentralization, and it's a popular word, but using this, I think it is pretty impactful and meaningful. And, I think we say compliance and, people immediately jump to like pre and post trade and like the very easy tangible deliverables, but things like trade surveillance or best execution and, operational efficiency all really come into this same world of compliance. So that concept of, really involving the entirety of the firm, I think, is a great perspective and way to look at it. I think one of the other pieces worth touching on here and getting the perspective is challenges, right? Whether it's, Jason, to your point of, having the right tone at the top, or, convincing everyone it's a shared responsibility. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing, Verity, in your engagements in terms of helping to build on this concept of a culture of compliance, whether it be, data and disparate systems and getting them to talk, or, more tangible, people-related aspects?
Yeah. Obviously both are relevant in this question. So, when it comes to the topic that Jason was referring to, and Matt, you just backed up, I mean, making sure you have that buy-in, from all users. And I think it's more about having those users understand what they're doing and its impact throughout the organization. And I talk about this a lot when it comes to different workflows and processes, making sure things are done consistently. You may have multiple users across the organization doing the same things, but it's about making sure that each person does the same tasks the same way. But making sure that those users are also being understand that with the work that they're doing, how it impacts someone else down the line. and that's where sometimes you tend to see some of those the errors start to occur, is because people are doing things differently, or they don't fully understand that what they're doing is now affecting I don't know, the trader, and and how they actually have to set up the account on the trading system or something like that. So it's just understanding that your role impacts everybody in the organization and the different things that you do. But I'd then say, when it comes to technology, as I mentioned before, it's about making sure that you're fully utilizing it. You need to make sure that you're using automated workflows, build out that rules-based logic that so many systems now support. And of course, in order to do that, you need to understand your business needs. You need to understand how things are actually working, and then also how to kind of more efficiently kind of like provide that same level out to even the clients. Because I think sometimes the compliance piece, people aren't even considering the touch points with their end clients. A lot of times you start even thinking just internal, but this also has to do with client interaction, client deliveries, things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think it's interesting from my seat, right? Like I'm working with a lot of, investment managers, asset managers, different types of funds and strategies. And, when we engage with a client that doesn't necessarily have that type of system in place, I think one of the biggest challenges that we see is getting them to understand the capacity and the capability of it, and the fact that like you don't have to rely on spreadsheets and source all of this data from different platforms to do a nightly compliance run. Like this is what firms like, ES and Advent have been doing for 20 plus years, trying to make it so that Excel, while it's an important tool, isn't the primary tool for a lot of these workflows where things can go wrong or break down. But kind of getting them there to the vision of, your entire rule set, regulatory, client-based, risk, operational, can be really brought into a system. And with really good data management practices and protocols, the saying is always good data in, good data out. So with really good data management protocols, and it doesn't need to be complicated, but it just has to be well thought out and, holistic. You can really lean on the tech instead of your people to deliver the results, and then your people will get to work on said results instead of spending the majority of their time, call it 80% producing the results to then analyze. You get to go right to the analysis part, which I think is, when you're working with somebody and you get to realize that aha moment with them, it's a pretty neat experience to have, or something that we've been able to do with clients before. Jason, anything else from your perspective you want to call out from, say, a challenges perspective that you've worked through or kind of seen in any of your engagements?
I'll take you through a challenging decision that I speak to a lot of startup managers or managers that have been around for a while. I mean, I think the decision to outsource compliance, right? Whether it's outsourcing testing or full CCO outsourcing, I see that a lot, and I think it makes sense for a small firm that is trying to launch, whether it's a hedge fund or small RIA, where they're having a difficult time fundraising. And I think it's cost savings, right, if you were to outsource that function. But on the other hand, I think you lose some of that personal touch, and that person might not have this similar interest in your business and knowledge as if you were to hire someone full time and perhaps have them wear multiple hats. So that's what I'm seeing challenges from some of the managers that I speak with.
I'm going to take myself off mute before I reply, but no, it's great insight to have, and kind of from both perspectives. As we kind of continue moving through, we kind of think about some other aspects of this. Jason, we start with you here. In your experience, what can firms do to really increase transparency without sacrificing speed to market? And to clarify, right, consider speed to market, more of a broad topic, not just order generation to execution. But any insights you have on what they could do to really, once you've kind of incubated this culture of compliance, to ensure that they're getting to market as effectively as possible?
Yeah, sure. And I'll kind of take the topic of kind of introducing new products, and having launched a fund in the last couple of years, I've experienced trying to get to market really quickly with a new product. And kind of what I see is, for established firms, a lot of firms are on legacy platforms and using manual compliance testing and training. So my recommendation is take time to build out an institutional infrastructure that is scalable. Within that, I think integration to your operating model is key. You want vendors to play nice to each other. As I worked with kind of ES and Advent in my history, it's nice to know that they integrate well with other business partners. And I think broadly, think about your automation and your processes and procedures, because Verity alluded to this before. Like, there's probably a solution, and you can leverage some type of technology to improve your workflows. Speaking about OMSs and PMA, it's best to kind of do the work at the onset, whether it's slow season or a new company, because the last thing you want to do is build out technology when the firm is growing. And through COVID, just an example, what you saw a lot was allocators and other consultants were kind of topping off their existing relationships. And these funds and managers were able to quickly bring a product to the market. So, for example, a long short fund would quickly add a long only fund, within weeks, as the market deteriorated at the kind of beginning of the COVID. The other thing I want to mention is just budget. So having worn the CFO hat multiple times, it's really important to get buy-in from senior members of the firm, the CFO, and get those budget dollars for technology and compliance. Work with your CFO, have them build a pro forma budget. I think the business case is that it can save the company money by not increasing headcount, and allows the firm to beef up their compliance program and meet other best practices.
Yeah, no, I think that's been one of the biggest trends lately, right? Is like, historically, a number of firms we engage with, it's resolution through human capital, when you need to think about, other ways to construct capital and to create efficiencies in your human capital. Not to say, we're the technology solutions are here to displace all the people. We're here to make their capacity, exponentially larger, is the ideal outcome, right? Verity, in your experience in the space and at Verisoft, what are some of the best practices or recommendations that you and the team are making around these topics? Obviously technology being a big part of it, but any thoughts or nuggets that you'd be able to give us on that topic?
Yeah, well, you actually used the word earlier. Integration, I think, is critical. When we start talking about true automated workflows and using a lot of that rules-based logic. Most people nowadays are using best of breed technology, which means they're using a different portfolio accounting system versus a trading system versus a CRM versus analytics software, and making sure that all of these separate processors, separate solutions are actually talking to each other and in a seamless fashion is, I think, one of the most important answers to kind of a lot of the challenges that firms encounter. Whenever you're having to do dual entry in multiple systems, that's a risk, right? And also, then, one of the questions you were initially asking, Matt, had to do with increasing transparency. Well, if you have systems actually talking to each other, that usually includes data that may typically be in your portfolio management system can actually get loaded into your CRM. So the users that are in CRM have more access to a lot of that data. It can also include trading information. So that transparency to information becomes accessible, throughout the firm. And that too is where you're going to be decreasing the risk of errors or issues, which of course is one of the most critical, points when it comes to compliance, is just mitigating all of those issues. So from my perspective, I think integration is such a critical point. I would also add actually documentation. Too often when I look at different organizations, it's what's I think is really great and a bit unique in this industry is the longevity of employees. That's wonderful. It's great that people are at these firms for 15, 20, 30 years even. That's great. However, as those workers are aging and are reaching closer to retirement, and you start looking at bringing on new staff, a lot of firms are finding that that knowledge of how processes were done or who did what is not documented anywhere. So making sure that those processes and procedures, as well as automation and integration, all of that is documented. For that, I prefer to say the proverbial, person who wins the lottery happens. You also have that backup. That to me is probably one of the most challenging things that I see people don't have, and needless to say, it is a time-consuming process, but it's so important for the success of an organization as well as their business continuity plans.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think the best of breed versus full technology stack continues to be an interesting topic, especially with acquisitions and how the market has changed over the last, call it 4 years substantially, with some of the key players, us included. We get more requests lately, to integrate as much information as possible. It's not just the classic, I need my positions and cash going one way and transactions going the other way. It's portfolio groups, it's portfolio reference information, it's full security master. We're doing integrations with research management systems, doing our part to ensure data is getting back to CRMs, because that, I like that information transparency tag that you put on it, because whether you're a 6-person company or 100-person or larger, that continues to be one of the biggest challenges, right? Working off of one, call it source of truth, where regardless of which system you're in, there's that level of confidence that this is audited, verified, accurate information that can be utilized for reporting, whether it's the investment management team that's utilizing it, whether it's for client reporting, whether it's for, ODD or anything kind of in that vein.
Matt, I was just going to talk about documentation that Verity brought up. So if you think about what type of internal documentation you have, is everyone has a compliance manual, your ADV, but don't be afraid to draft like a desktop procedures, right? And you can have things that are specific to allocations, right? But I would, with one caveat, that I would run that by your counsel or internal general counsel to see if those things would need to be disclosed in your ADV. But it's so true that a lot of organizations don't have documentation, and from the SEC's perspective, if you didn't document it, you didn't do it. So it's really like a worst case scenario. Like I use this analogy of like, what if someone gets hit by a bus, right? Or a train? Like, is there someone else that could do their job?
Yeah, perfect. And Obviously, Verity is the optimist here, using the win the lottery scenario versus Jason and my hit by the bus or train scenario. So I'm going to try to be more on the positive side moving forward and think about it that way. Jason, I know you're obviously working on a project with us specifically at the moment. Any additional, thoughts or guidances from a best practice perspective, or just kind of considering like, how do you prioritize, or how do you get the most out of the technology partner when you're trying to, really streamline things?
Yeah, and I think it really starts with, what are you trying to solve, right? What's the problem? And look at the benefits over the features, right? And I think you have to spend time on an engagement to really understand the firm, their processes, if they have any inefficiencies, and how the technology partner can help those out. So, from my prior experience of working, I worked with as OMS for 9 years at Coleraine Capital, and that was a great compliance tool because they have compliance rules and regulations that are all rules-based, which can alert the CCO if there are any violations. We could reconcile with third parties, transaction cost analysis, which is actually, has been around for a while, but I think it's becoming increased importance because of a lot of firms are outsourcing trading now. Portfolio allocations and schemes, trying to understand what disclosures are in ADVs or compliance manuals, and really kind of aligning those practices with what's in the document. I think also utilizing the technology vendor to help streamline and automate some of the manual processes. So for example, how can we use as reporting to do compliance testing, which something might have been very manual, like can you help us build out queries to test performance, to manually calc performance, or make sure that we're allocating in accordance with our policy, or how can we make sure that there's no cherry picking going on, and really looking at profitable trades. So there's a lot of things that you can look at, but going back to like, look at the problem you're trying to solve first for the specific client.
Perfect. No, I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's all really, you're kind of thinking about whether it's evolutionary or pivotal types of shifts in the organization, definitely all things worth considering. So as we're kind of closing in on our timeline here, I do want to pivot to more of a, trendy topic, right? So Verity, if we start with you, any thoughts on how tech can play a role in increasing popular trends such as ESG, or I'll even broaden this to, call it custom portfolio construction requirements within firms? Gotta hit the highlights of ESG when we get a group together.
Of course. Yeah, and it is a popular trend, shall we say, but I think it is definitely going to be an ongoing, almost like a requirement. I tend to see just about every organization out there, every investment manager is rolling out this type of investment strategy. And I think it does come down to needing to use technology to track and set up those rules and requirements in the software to ensure that you are in compliance with those strategies. That is just not anything that somebody can manually be doing. Ensuring that every time you're entering a trade that it's falls in line with their requirements, or that it's doesn't go against the policies of that investment type, whether it's ESG or it's no tobacco, or some of those really simple things that have been around for so long. So really it just comes down to you got to be using those rules-based requirements and set up in your software.
Yeah, I think you made a great point there that I want to highlight a little bit more, right? Like not everyone is building out and bringing an ESG product to market, right? But everybody has investors, and it's continuing to be more and more commonplace that those investors are coming in with their own mandates and requirements. So they may be subscribing to your SMID or mid or all cap type of product, and then providing their own kind of layer of stay out of the sin stocks, right? No alcohol, tobacco, firearms, etc. Or obviously steer clear of certain countries or aspects. And I think that is honestly one of the harder, it even more difficult than ESG to solve for, because in that custom portfolio construction realm, right, you're not just building one of them. You could have 50 of them with varying inputs or requirements. So trying to systematize that, as we would say, becomes extremely important. I think we've gotten into conversations with clients where they like, we have a model. It's like, great, so let's talk about how you bring that model in. Well, it's like, actually we have 15 models. It's like, so where do the other 14 come from? It's like, well, we have the primary one, and then we maintain deviations of it based off of client input, when in reality that's introducing a tremendous amount of risk and strain on the investment team, when you could just bring that all into a platform and ideally make their lives a lot easier by sticking with the truth, the true model, and then handling those diversifications within a platform. Jason, any thoughts, and kind of some of those challenges people are seeing when they're trying to solve for things like that, or from an ESG perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some firms that are not interested in introducing an ESG product, or don't currently have a, let's call it, responsible investment policy, get questions from consultants and allocators, right? And there's, the consultants have always had a couple questions on their due diligence questionnaires, but they're very simple. Now you're getting a lot of things like, what do you do for ESG? Talk to us about proxy voting and how you consider ESG factors. Diversity inclusion could also be grouped into this conversation as well.
Absolutely.
So I think like more firms are going to have to look at their business through an ESG lens. And perhaps if they haven't done it already, draft the policy in terms of do they look at an ESG lens through the investment screening, through proxy voting, and kind of the compliance overlap is the CCO and compliance department is going to have to monitor and review ESG factors, right? The SEC came out with a risk alert a month or two ago, kind of outlining some of those points. So if anyone hasn't looked at that or doesn't subscribe to the Division of Examinations, which used to be called OC, take a look on their site. But just overall portfolio construction, from my experience, it's when you're managing a lot of SMAs, it's very important to have a system that's customizable, flexible, and frankly, something that you get buy-in from the investment team and traders, because most of the time they're going to be ones that are modeling the accounts and rebalancing. So spend time training and teaching them and getting some buy-in.
Perfect. I did have a couple other things I wanted to get to, but we are kind of at our time limit. So, if before we close up, Verity and Jason, if there's one kind of piece of advice you would give, at a high level for folks that are either evaluating or reevaluating tools, if you want to leave us with that as your closing thoughts, and I'll again say thank you for joining me in this panel as we talk about the larger compliance realm and needs of a firm. And Verity, you can jump in first.
Okay, sounds good. I think my one tip when it comes to evaluating is ensure that you are involving every department across the organization. Don't just let the IT department or just ops be the evaluator and selector of a solution. You got to make sure that you're involving all the different groups from front, middle, and back office. Too often I see, a platform selected, and as it gets rolled out, then other departments start chiming in, they start using it and going, hey, but it can't do this, it can't do that, or this was always a problem workflow for us. We still don't have a solution for that. So my one tip is just make sure that you spread the knowledge and get people involved in that selection process from the beginning across the entire organization.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Fantastic point. And it's going to pay dividends for a very long time when run well and run correctly. Jason, any closing thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Verity about getting everyone involved, but also have a process, right? So build out a matrix and have a number of factors where you can actually, do an apples to apples comparison of the vendors. Look at pricing, ask for references. Like, you get so much information when you actually speak to a user of the platform, who's been on it, whether they're a small firm, large firm. Some other factors you can look at are contract terms. How does it integrate with other technology vendors? And if you look at your flow chart of your apps and processes, think of where that's going to fit in and impact everything else. And then also, the last thing that I brought up earlier is budget, right? You want to get that initial buy-in to have those dollars to spend on technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you both for joining me. And if anybody has any follow-up questions after the fact, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll leave all of our contact information is in the Engage portal. And thank you for your time. Have a great day, everyone.